Recently, on a channel, I'm not going to mention the channel, uh, they have had done 3 shows, largely attacking Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, and in that they began attacking Dr. John Henrik Clarke. And critique is okay as long as it's in good faith and well founded. I think that we all know that. Um, but as a student of Dr. John Henry Clarke, which I am, somebody who's actually worked uh, in my capacity uh, 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 for him for about 10 years. I met Dr. Clarke when he was 70 something, and he, in this course of time period, I got to really know him personally. Not like a lot of people who might have been just students of his in the classroom. I traveled with him to Africa in 1986. Um, I bought in books for his library. When his eyesight was failing, me and my former wife uh, made a point of picking him up, sometimes in turns, if I couldn't make it or she couldn't make it, and taking him home. And then in the later part of his life, when his eyesight was really gone, I was a reader for him as he was compiling his last works, African World Revolution. Um, Dr. John Henry Clarke with Dr. Leonard Jeffries helped me get my first job at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture of the New York Public Library, where Dr. Clarke got his start. And he helped with Dr. Leonard Jeffries convince the uh, head of the Schomburg, Dr. Howard Dotson, to let me work there, first as an intern and then later in information systems and whatever the library needed. For about 4 years, almost everything that came out of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture to the public, uh, I typeset for them as part of my job capacity. For many of the exhibitions in the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, I typeset with the curators, right, for them to be hung on the walls. Um, one evening, uh, as I was leaving from work, they called me into the office. And wow, when you get called in the office, you probably think you did something. But uh, Howard Dotson told me that Dr. John Henry Clarke had just got off the phone with him and asked if I could be present the next day uh, as Dr. Clarke's escort, his personal escort, because as I knew, Bishop Tutu was coming to the Schomburg Center, and Dr. Clarke wanted one of his good men to be with him. So I met Dr. Clarke downstairs, um, and I was his escort for the incredible presence of Bishop Tutu, one of the liberators of South Africa, along with his wife. And ultimately, at the last days, well, before then, my father had passed away, and Dr. Clarke uh, came to my father's funeral, along with several scholars, um, Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor Scobie, and others um, came to my father's funeral. And the head of the Schomburg, Howard Dotson, came to see my father off. Um, in the one year before his passing, he was, of course, with his wife, Sybil Williams Clarke. That's where he was living as he was getting ill. And then we found out the news that Dr. Clarke had passed away. And Dr. Clarke was like a grandfather to me, both promoting me and at times scolding me. At one time in Africa, it was interesting that we were traveling in Africa. It was me, Dr. Jeffries, and Dr. Clarke. I was his escort. And we were traveling on the dirt roads of Africa and Ghana at this particular time. And we had visited two mosques, two African Islamic mosques. And I began to unfortunately complain. It was a long day, long drives, and that was my mistake because Dr. Clarke was at the driver's side, Dr. Jeffries was in the middle, and I was at the behind the driver. And I started complaining to Dr. Jeffries about, uh, look, we haven't eaten. It's time to go. It's getting ready to get sundown. And unfortunately, Dr. Clarke had a mission. And I was uh, deterring them from their mission by talking to Dr. Jeffries. And Dr. Clarke reached over through Dr. Jeffries and he said, "Shut up. You're a damn fool." And I was like, well, wow, this is the great Dr. John Henrik Clarke. So why am I a damn fool in my mind? Not in the speech, in my mind. And then he began to lecture both me and Dr. Jeffries about going to the greatest mosque that Africans ever built in Africa, called the Tuba Mosque, where Africans wrote the Quran in their own language because they felt that the Arabs were not true Muslims in culture and in treatment. And that's Dr. John Henrik Clarke. For the people around him, he would correct them, but then reward them with one of the greatest in person lectures that you will hear. So Dr. John Henrik Clarke lectured me personally. And that's a different type of lecturing. So when we got to the doors of Tuba Mosque, first of all, it transformed into a medieval Islamic scene where there were beautiful women with beautiful clothing, and many of them bare-breasted, uh, even bare-breasted and having children on their back tied, but still nevertheless um, bare-breasted, uh, and um, people in the market were selling goods, and it was loud, but it was very orderly. So we walked to the front doors of Tuba Mosque, and of course it was closed. The mosque wasn't open, and Dr. Jeffries began to bang, boom, boom, boom on the door. And the reason why it was closed because they were having some type of meeting, right? So the guard came, and Dr. Jeffries in French told him that we're Africans from America, and we have brought one of our greatest scholars, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, and he would like to walk with us and talk with us in the mosque. So the guard went back, and then the imam of the mosque came out. The imam of the Tuba Mosque came out, and he uh, recognized who Dr. John Henrik Clarke was. And he shook his hands, and he said that he was in an important meeting and he would love to uh, walk and talk with us, but it hadn't been planned. But he said that we could have our passage through the mosque, and if he got a chance, he would come back. So the doors opened, and there was this water fountain on the side, and Dr. John Henry Clarke walked through us walked to the water fountain, took off his shoes, then his socks, and turned to us like we were stupid and said, uh, uh, "Do as I do." So we took off our shoes and socks, and Dr. Clarke began to wash his feet, and so did we. And then for the rest of the time at Tuba Mosque, we walked barefoot through the whole mosque. And then we climbed where the call for prayer is, and Dr. Clarke took us up there, and we were able to see the whole grounds from the top of the uh, place where they called the prayer. And it was one of the most unbelievable scenes I will take with me. Um, Dr. Clarke in um, 97, I think, passed away. And we organized his funeral at Abyssinia Baptist Church, where Reverend Calvin O. Butts presided. And I had worked with Reverend Calvin O. Butts with many of the funerals of our greats, um, before then and then after that. But there I was there for the funeral of Dr. John Henrik Clarke. And of course, I had two duties. One was I had the duty of managing the 1,000 people that were outside that could not get in because they were not timely, and getting in those who I knew uh, had to be there, and unfortunately turning away many that I knew because they were untimely. And I closed the doors. That was my job. I closed the doors, and that was that. And then I had another duty, which would be to be as I was, grandson of Dr. Clarke. Me and the Sons of Africa, who were my brothers, we took turns um, uh, in front of the where Dr. Clarke was rested in our ceremonial uh, position. And then when after all the speakers had spoken, and a lot of people that you know were younger than I. I know many of the people. The only person that I know of the community that you watched that was there was Jabari Asase. He was the only one that I uh, know of this community that we're in that was there, but he was very young at that time period. Um, and so after everyone had spoken, all of the organizations, all the people from the old Black nationalist movement and from ASCAC and from others, um, my next job was to be a pallbearer for Dr. John Henrik Clarke. So they assembled me. The pallbearers were the professional pallbearers, not the community, until we put him in the uh, casket. But I followed Dr. John Henrik Clarke to the elevator of the um, church, and the many people don't know funeral parlors is almost a secret society. They have particular roles that you don't know. Some of them are armed, right? Some of them are uh, how can I say, they have their own ritualistic rules that they follow. So we were in this elevator. They opened up the coffin one last time, and they meticulously took all the things that people put in Dr. John Henrik Clarke's coffin. People put flowers, people put notes, people put ornaments, people put things. And they took all those things, uh, and sometimes people put bad things, right? But they're a secret society, and they took everything that they could find uh, from Dr. Clarke. They even, how can I say, removed his coat, his jacket, and they searched inside to make sure that nothing that any human put there, um, anything. And then the next stop was the funeral hearse. And that's the last time I saw Dr. John Henrik Clarke. Um, the only other thing that I saw was when Alk sent me a picture of when he went to visit Dr. Clarke's grave. Uh, and that was that. Dr. John Henry Clarke's house is on 223, I think 130. Is it on 138th Street, 137th Street? It's the next block from Abyssinia. So it's on 137th Street. And there is a Clarke House on Compton Avenue, but it is something that was in the name of Dr. John Henry Clarke, but I'm not even sure that Dr. Clarke ever went to that building, uh, but it's named after him. But his place, and the next time I get a chance, I'll take a picture of it. It's the worst building on that block, which is part of Stryver's Row. It's boarded up. Um, it's not been on the market because, but it will probably be sold for taxes. We weren't able to get the building, so that's why they created the Clarke House on 138th Street, because it was in his daughter's name, Nzinga. Um, so there in that building was Dr. John Henry Clarke's library, who where I went to read for him, and to be a messenger between Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Dr. Clarke, to pick up things and to receive things. I worked on a project with Dr. John Henry Clarke, a scholarly project on Dr. Clarke wanted Diop's book Civilization or Barbarism to be uh, translated from French to English. And I was in school for computer science, and I was part of this committee between Dr. Clarke, Yalingi Ngimi, and Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and me and my former director at the Schomburg, my direct supervisor, we went to Connecticut to get a PC, but it wasn't a Microsoft PC. It was before the Microsoft PCs, and it was standardized. So we got this computer, and I was in charge of the backing up the data and making sure that the machine worked well for Yalingi Ngimi to translate the book. Um, I was young. I was just happy to be there. You won't see my name in the credits, but if you were able to talk to Dr. Leonard Jeffries, so I have a video, you would know that I was on that project. So today, what I am here to do is protect the elder.
Peace to the family. I'm with Baba, Dr. Leonard Jeffries Jr., and this is our victory today. This is the African origin of civilization at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is history. This is these great scholars' great work and our victory. This book right here, Dr. J, tell them about civilization of barbarism. Step up.
Civilization of barbarism. This is the victory. Once you have this knowledge, you know who was involved in the origin of humankind. You know who was involved in the development of the multiple civilizations in the Nile Valley. You know who laid the foundation for Greece and Rome. And so this is the great work of TransAtlantic in French that I use to translate his legacy. And so we name it and we claim it. And we never backed away from it. We never submitted.
Now, just for the audience, civilization or barbarism, the translation into English, right?
Yes.
Funded by the Black United Fund.
Yes, we got funding from the Black United Fund. The first grant that our brother of the Black United Fund gave was $20,000 to have this book translated. And of course they took him down because he was using the communications too seriously. And they knew how significant it was going to be to have him do what he did. But he didn't hesitate to do it. And interesting enough, Sheikh Anta Diop and Dr. Yusuf Benyan, our daddy, never got along. And Dr. Ben never wanted to accept Sheikh Anta Diop because of the wife. However, it was in Dr. Ben's office on 125th Street and 7th Avenue that I came back and we needed somebody to complete the work that I had started. And who was in Dr. Ben's office on 125th Street? Brother Yanenge Geme from the Congo. And it was there that Dr. Ben said, I got the person that can help you. And so these type of connections are made. It was in Dr. Ben's office on 125th Street and 7th Avenue that I came back and we needed somebody to complete the work that I had started. And who was in Dr. Ben's office on 125th Street? Brother Yanenge Geme from the Congo. And it was there that Dr. Ben said, I got the person that can help you. And so these type of connections are made.
And who was also part of the team? Who was the computer person and part of the team?
And we were lucky to have a young man who was trying to do his thing. And his name was ReginaldMabry. But that's not the full name. The full name is Reginald Antoine Mabry.
So, and Dr. John Henrik Clarke was the one who put it all together.
He was the glue that kept the linkage.
His foot on your neck.
Yes, and also he knew how to neutralize Dr. Ben because he was an elder, and Dr. Ben was acknowledged that yes, this is the book by the great brother. The story that's there. This is what is. She had to walk away. But no, we couldn't have asked for anything better.
Could you believe this in your lifetime? The Metropolitan Museum of Art.
That's right.
With Africa on this side and Egypt on this side. In the middle have an exhibition of using both. You saw the photos?
Yes.
Right?
So it's a fantastic.
Of Africa, of ancient Egypt, and West Africa.
That's right. And we couldn't have planned this. In fact, 1968 was an important year. We had the urban explosions with whatnot, but what was important was Dr. Clarke. And most people didn't realize this little physically limited in size. Dr. Clarke was a short man, but he was a giant. And he put these young men around him and young women, tiger cubs. And so these are the names that I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, whether we have sun or not. But you had Dr. Len Jeffries, one of the elders. You had under me Dr. James Turner, and next to him you had Dr. Ronald Walters. And then the sisters were not taking a back seat. Shashi McIntyre, she let you know that she had her stuff together. John Jackson, I gave him his first full teaching job. I had him at City College for a visiting professorship. Usually a visiting professorship is 1 year. I was able to keep Jackson 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Nobody has a visiting a lectureship for 3 years. And then after he was with us, Dr. Clarke's mentor was with us at City for 3 years, we didn't throw him to the garbage. Our club, our family in Chicago picked him up and brought him to Chicago. Not for 1 year, but for 2 years and 3 years. Jacob Carruthers took care of him just like we would have taken care of Dr. Clarke. This type of relationship is what has to be the story that we have to tell.
Dr. Jeffries, this is really important. What will you say now to Alan Dershowitz, to Henry Louis Gates, to Cornel West, to the people who wrote the Disuniting of America?
Just one phrase.
Yes.
It's for all of them. Truth, crushed to earth, will rise again, stronger than before. If we had raised it at another period of time, it wouldn't have had its impact. Truth crushed to earth will rise again stronger than before, and this is the best time for it.
Recently, a social media YouTube channel recently attacked Dr. John Henrik Clarke for his foreword to Michael Bradley's book, The Iceman Inheritance, and sought to categorize Dr. John Henrik Clarke as a racist. They have been recently going through black scholars or black personalities and throwing away their work. I don't mind well-founded analysis, and they make good points at times. However, on their critique of Dr. Clarke, they failed to understand his foreword. This is why I have taken out time to address their show. Not to destry them, but to show what they have missed, and they can do better. This type of conclusory thinking is common among Black American men who have not engaged in the study of African history academically. Groups on YouTube engage in group thinking to hide their individual inadequacies in academic training or to push fringe thinking. They hide using pseudo-names that they change often and repackage their views on other social media channels to gain momentum. Many of them marginalize and minimize other voices who have much more skill level themselves to create a false equality on views. They also attempt to merge different personalities into one grouping using extreme views to attack scholars like Dr. Clarke. They will compare what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing has said and make it seem that Dr. Clarke was saying the same thing or framing his conversations the same way. Dr. John Henrik Clarke is a respected historian who uses history as framework for analysis. When I say he is a historian, I mean that he studies history of Europeans, Africans, and Americans. When he engages in critique, he often mentions facts that contain periods, peoples, ideology, forces, movements. There seems to be a new movement of people who critique racism as being racist. Dr. Clarke in his foreword seemed to use Bradley's work to say that finally there has been a critique of white racism by a European descendant. What these young men do not know that there hadn't been many critiques on white racism in popular books. Dr. Clarke also knew that Bradley's earlier book upset white racism enough to have a discussion. What Dr. Clarke did was add the African example and used his time to use what Europeans did to Africa. Accusations that Dr. John Henrik Clarke's foreword to Michael Bradley's The Iceman Inheritance is itself racist and misunderstand his intent, content, and intellectual legacy. Here's a detailed explanation of why such allegations is unfounded. What Dr. Clarke said: the important contribution that Michael Bradley has made to this subject is in the realm of an alarmist, calling attention to what has already happened and what needs to be done about it. Western racism is a disease that has affected the whole world. Its after effect might, in the final analysis, do more harm than good to its creators. This book is not a masterpiece of scholarship or analysis. The content of the book, The Iceman Inheritance, is an important message for our times and all times if we have the hopes of creating a world free of war, race hatred, and tension. His inquiry into this subject, his bold admissions and revelations, will inevitably open other doors and put other subjects on our intellectual agenda for investigation. In my opinion, this is the meaning of his investigation and the essence of his contribution to the subject of race in a changing world. It's funny to me that they critique Dr. Clarke for writing the foreword to the Iceman inheritance to attack him as a scholar. They claim that this makes Dr. Clarke a racist. It was Michael Bradley who has used Caucasian throughout the book. When Dr. Clarke used this word, if you have read his work, he was talking about systems and certainly white supremacy, not individual people, except if individual were responsible. It's also funny that people enjoy the privileges of white supremacy but say they are not racist. Michael Bradley's book is a counter-racist book. He is attacking white supremacy and not being one of those European descent individuals that simply enjoy the system. Again, Dr. Clarke, as a historian, took the opportunity to weave in the African story in a historical way. Michael Bradley, as Dr. Clarke said, was an alarmist. Bradley said this book is racist, for, among other things, I will attempt to show that racism itself is a predisposition of but one race of mankind, the white race. I believe that I can show that our converging contemporary crises, like racism itself, have their origins in the prehistory of the white race alone. We attribute various threats to our survival to man's folly, but this is a conscious and self-protecting euphemism. Nuclear war, environmental pollution, resource rape, all are primary threats to our survival, and all are the result of peculiarly Caucasoid behavior, Caucasoid values, Caucasoid psychology. There is no way to avoid the truth. The problem with the world is white men. If this insight has generally escaped us, it is only because we Caucasoids have dictated much history, written most of it, and judged it in terms of our own self-image. But we have never looked at ourselves in an objective biological mirror, and that is what we shall now proceed to do. I will say, as the author of this presentation, there is no one way to critique racist and racism, and not one way to act against it. Racism is violent, and fighting against it will be violent. Before you critique Dr. Clarke and many of those who stood against it, such as Malcolm X, Harriet Tubman, Jim Brown, the abolitionist who killed his fellow man, those of the slave revolts in America, the Haitian Revolution and Caribbean uprisings, and even those who fought in the Civil War, then you must call them all racist. If you yourself, whatever ancestry you come from, enjoy white supremacy and find ways to protect it, then you yourself may be a racist, a comfortable, quiet racist. Nevertheless, a racist. Racism in America is inescapable. It's American as apple pie. I am privileged to have worked with Dr. Clarke and followed his work. If Dr. Clarke is a racist for writing in this book, then you are a racist for not yourself fighting against racism. Disproof without deliverance. The enduring hypocrisy of science, religion, and the global persistence of white supremacy. Despite the scientific consensus over the past half-century that the biological concept of race is a fallacy, white supremacy and racial hierarchies remain entrenched worldwide. Theodore W. Allen's work on the invention of the white race is academically accepted as well as other notable scholars. However, they have failed to uproot systemic racism. It highlights the complicit role of religious institutions in promoting or tolerating racial ideology and argues that science and academia alone cannot achieve racial justice without coordinated institutional, cultural, and spiritual reforms. Advances in genetics, anthropology, and history have thoroughly dismantled the idea that humanity can be legitimately divided into discrete biological races. Genome.gov, 2022, Harvard Library, 2025, PNAS, 2024. Scholars, including Theodore W. Allen, a pioneering historian, and many European intellectuals, have critically examined the origins and construction of white supremacy as a socially engineered system to uphold elite power. Allen, 1994-1997, Jones, 2024. Yet, despite these rigorous academic critiques and the definitive scientific consensus, white supremacy remains deeply embedded in global legal systems, cultural narratives, and religious frameworks. Smithsonian Magazine, 2019, Britannica, 2025. Science is not enough. Theodore W. Allen's groundbreaking work revealed that whiteness was deliberately invented in colonial Virginia to divide laborers and maintain ruling class control, establishing race as a tool of social control rather than a biological fact. European scholars and Marxist historians have further explored and critiqued the historical roots of white supremacy, uncovering its origins in economic exploitation, colonialism, and legal codifications. Harvard Library, 2025, MIT Press Reader, 2024. This body of scholarship emphasizes that race is a socio-political construct with profound material consequences, sustained by interlocking institutions rather than biology. Nonetheless, social and institutional racism persists because scientific knowledge rarely translates into political will, social reform, or cultural change. Smithsonian Magazine, 2019, PMC, 2024. The religious complicity in sustaining racial hierarchies. Beyond intellectual and scientific efforts, religious institutions, purporting universal inclusion, have actively supported and propagated white supremacy. Christianity's doctrine of discovery facilitated centuries of conquest and enslavement with ecclesiastical sanction, and church bodies often sanctified segregation and racial oppression. Jones, 2024, Harvard Gazette, 2023. In various Islamic contexts, religious distinctions have been used to justify social stratification despite core theological affirmations of equality. Hinduism's caste hierarchy, racialized further under colonial rule, persists in intertwining spiritual and racial systems of exclusion. Although movements within faith traditions, such as liberation theology and anti-apartheid activism, have opposed racism, these remain exceptional and insufficient to offset institutional inertia and complicity. The persistence of race as a social and spiritual construct. The endurance of race reflects entrenched power structures that benefit from maintaining social hierarchies, economic exploitation, and cultural myths. The wages of whiteness endure despite scientific refutation. PNAS, 2024, Smithsonian Magazine, 2019. Pseudoscientific racism continues to re-emerge, often tacitly supported or inadequately challenged by religious organizations and cultural norms. Cornell News, 2017, MIT Press Reader, 2024. There has to be methods toward systemic change beyond science. Science is not enough. The scientific debunking of race as biological fallacy and the scholarly unveiling of whiteness as a social invention have not translated into lived racial justice. White supremacy remains global, adaptive, and deeply embedded in institutions, culture, and spirituality. To dismantle it, coordinated efforts spanning scientific education, genuine religious accountability, legal reform, and cultural transformation are indispensable. Revolution is what is needed, both passive and maybe violent. The African in America has a better case for revolution than the Americans who fought against Britain over taxation, especially when the American colonists got to America on the bill of the crown, which they never repaid. The victors of war never tell you that the American colonist actually robbed the crown, and when they were strong enough, fought a pretextual war to hide their grifting of what the British crown had pain in their colonizing of the Americas while maintaining slavery. The question is, how long does the oppressed of African people have to wait? Dr. Clarke's contribution is again using the African experience of enslavement and oppression as a model for redress. I have and will say this many times. A critique on Dr. Clarke for his writing in the Bradley's Iceman Inheritance is unfounded. It would be better to critique what he said, and even if he used Caucasian, it was in the scope of criticizing white supremacy. What is missing from these arguments is a critique on those who propagate white supremacy. It is ridiculous to critique Dr. Clarke without critiquing the thousands of authors who propagated white supremacy and ignored the crimes associated in it. Dr. Clarke's work is largely academic, even if it's public. His words, as important as they were printed, cannot be criticized without the proper criticism of white supremacy ills from its many authors. If one was trained academically, they would immediately see that Dr. Clarke's is a systems analysis. It is interesting to note that while these YouTubers have criticized Dr. John Henrik Clarke as a racist for writing the foreword to Michael Bradley's book, The Iceman Inheritance, Henry Louis Gates, Jr., whom many regard as a preeminent scholar, did not label Dr. Clarke as racist in his New York Times op-ed. Instead, in his article, Black Demagogues and Pseudo-Scholars, published on July 20, 1992, Gates discussed Afrocentric scholarship and mentioned Dr. Clarke's association with Bradley's controversial book, noting specifically that Clarke had written the introduction. Gates's critique was broader, focusing on what he saw as the dangerous rise of demagogues and pseudo-scholars in the black community, who in some cases promoted anti-Semitic views and questionable historical claims. However, Gates did not name Dr. Clarke as a demagogue or pseudo-scholar in the article. Instead, he referenced Clarke within the context of the Afrocentric academic movement and its engagement with works like Bradley's, but stopped short of personal accusations against Clarke. Dr. Clarke responded strongly to Gates's op-ed, rejecting the notion that he or his colleagues were demagogues or pseudo-scholars. Clarke argued, "He should never refer to anyone as a demagogue unless he's ready to call the names of the demagogues, singular or plural, and point out the nature of their demagoguery. He should never refer to any scholar as being pseudo unless he is ready to name the scholar and prove the pseudo-nature of his or her work. To disagree with a scholar does not make the scholar a demagogue." This exchange was a real exchange during its time. There seems to be a problem when young YouTubers do not report on correspondences between scholars and then make accusations. If Henry Louis Gates did not call Dr. Clarke a racist for writing the foreword, then curiously, how does the critique of YouTubers even matter? Well, I guess it matters on YouTube, but until they do, as Dr. Clarke said, and have the stature to do it, their criticism should not matter. In this, I am criticizing them slightly for not seeing that Henry Louis Gates himself stopped for making any more points of Dr. Clarke's foreword except a mention. Clarke further maintained that scholars Gates critiqued had thoroughly engaged with neglected historical records and were actively engaged in a broader scholarly movement to reclaim African history, advocating for a reconsideration of existing historical narratives. In summary, Henry Louis Gates, Jr., in the July 20, 1992, New York Times article, critiqued trends in Afrocentric scholarship, but did not call Dr. Clarke a racist or identify him personally with the demagogic behaviors he denounced. Dr. Clarke, in his published response, defended his scholarly work and challenged Gates for making generalized accusations about the black scholarly community without evidence or specific names. Labeling Dr. Clarke's introduction as racist ignores his focus on dismantling racism, his rejection of hierarchical race theories, and his core message, fostering honest reckoning and mutual liberation. His critique is systemic and scholarly, not personal or prejudiced. Let's take a deeper dive into what Dr. Clarke's work was really about. Dr. John Henrik Clarke's Systematic Critique of Racism, Aspects and Analysis. Dr. John Henrik Clarke's introduction to Michael Bradley's The Iceman Inheritance serves as a comprehensive critique of the origins, development, and consequences of racism, especially as it arose and functioned within Western European-centric societies. Clarke's critique meticulously addresses the rationale, methods, institutional backing, and enduring global impact of racism, and finally offers clear directions for overcoming it. Below, the critique is organized around key aspects identified in his commentary. Clarke's critique. Clarke asserts that racism was not a natural or universal human reality, but was deliberately constructed by European societies to serve their economic and social needs, especially during and after the Middle Ages. As Europe emerged from centuries of poverty and crisis, European leaders and thinkers invented ideologies of superiority to justify their aggressive expansion, via conquest, colonialism, and especially the transatlantic slave trade. Racism, in Clarke's framework, was engineered to legitimize domination of richer or more developed African and Asian regions, providing a moral and philosophical cover for exploitation. Historical manipulation. Clarke's critique. A central feature of Clarke's argument is his analysis of how Europeans systematically distorted world history. He maintains that Europeans not only recorded history to suit their narrative, but actively claimed undue credit for civilization's progress while obscuring or minimizing non-European achievements. According to Clarke, African and Asian civilizations were building cities, literature, and philosophy centuries before Europe emerged from its own Neolithic period. But European historians rewrote or omitted these facts to exalt European achievements and to further justify contemporary racism. Religious institutional role. Clarke's critique. Clarke is especially critical of the role of the Christian Church and other European institutions in legitimizing and perpetuating racist ideologies. He points out that the Church, despite preaching equality in the spiritual sense, crafted and supported doctrines that cast Africans and other non-Europeans as inherently inferior or subhuman. This institutional blessing provided racism with a moral framework, enabling centuries of slavery, colonial subjugation, and missionary condescension, all rationalized as both spiritually required and culturally superior. Psychological function. Clarke's critique. Going deeper than institutions or economics, Clarke examines the psychological roots and effects of racism. He posits that repeated and loud claims of superiority by Europeans are, in fact, a sign of deep-seated insecurity, not confidence. If Europeans truly believed in their inherent superiority, Clarke reasons, they would not feel compelled to continually assert it. Thus, the ideology of racism also functioned to rally and stabilize European identity during periods of self-doubt or crisis. Global consequences. Clarke's critique. Clarke contends that racism proved disastrous for the entire world. Its harms were not limited to those it oppressed, but rebounded destructively upon the perpetrators themselves. Societies in the Americas, Africa, and Asia were devastated physically and culturally, while the societies that constructed and maintained racist systems became morally corrupted and continually unstable. From inspired resistance, slave revolts, anti-colonial movements, to enduring legacies of conflict and trauma, racism undermined global civilization and progress as a whole. Solution advocated. Clarke's critique. For Clarke, the only adequate response to this historical disease is a rigorous, honest confrontation with the origins, persistence, and impact of racism. He calls for the dismantling of racist structures and ideologies at every level, historical, institutional, psychological, urging all societies to move beyond excuses and face uncomfortable truths. The ultimate aim is not to invert hierarchies, but to build justice, fostering a world where mutual respect and genuinely equitable relations prevail. Comparative summary. Table of Dr. Clarke's analysis. Origins. Racism was consciously invented by European powers to support expansion and exploitation after the Middle Ages. Historical manipulation. Europeans rewrote world history to disguise the advanced achievements of Africa and Asia and to aggrandize Europe, justifying contemporary racism. Religious institutional role. The Christian Church and European states gave racism not only legal but spiritual authority, actively supporting systems of oppression. Psychological function. Continual declarations of racial superiority betray the internal insecurity of the perpetrators. Racism provided a stabilizing myth for European societies. Global consequences. The resulting systems did not merely oppress the colonized, but ultimately injured the colonizers, perpetuating violence, resistance, and ethical harm across the globe. Solution advocated. Clarke emphasizes the need for honesty, institutional overhaul, and justice-driven reconciliation to dismantle racist systems and heal their legacies. Castigating critique of those who misread and malign. Dr. Clarke's work. It is both intellectually dishonest and historically irresponsible for some to misread Dr. Clarke's powerful analysis and brand it as racist simply because it forthrightly confronts the documented realities of European-driven racism. Such a charge reflects, at best, a superficial engagement with Clarke's text, or at worst, a willful distortion intended to silence necessary critique. Those who hurl accusations of reverse racism at Clarke conflate a rigorous, evidence-based condemnation of systemic injustice with the very prejudices and hierarchical thinking that Clarke denounces. Dr. Clarke does not call for supremacy, vengeance, or the inversion of racist hierarchies. Rather, he rejects the entire framework of racial hierarchy. He exposes historically verifiable crimes, not to scapegoat individuals or ethnic groups, but to strip away the myths used to justify exploitation and to illuminate a pathway toward genuine justice and reconciliation. Such critics, by refusing to distinguish between a critique of systems and a condemnation of individuals, only reinforce the very ignorance and ideological defensiveness that perpetuate racial misunderstanding and inequalities. Dismissing Clarke as racist for stating uncomfortable truths is not only a misreading, it is a form of intellectual evasion that betrays an unwillingness to face history, preferring denial and scapegoating to the work of collective healing. In the end, those who agitate against Clarke's introduction reveal more about their own discomfort with historical accountability than any legitimate failing in Clarke's scholarship or moral vision. Far from being racist, Clarke's work is an unequivocal challenge to all forms of racial thought, a demand for honesty, maturity, and action in the pursuit of justice for all. In essence, Clarke's critique is both historical and moral, urging societies to face the true origins and functions of racism and to work collectively for a world free from its destructive grip. Those who mischaracterize his work only underscore the urgency of his call. My final words are first. I am a student of Dr. John Henrik Clarke and worked with him on several projects including Chiek Antajop's translation from French to English project with Ya Lengingemi and Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Clarke and Dr. Jeffries aided me in getting my first professional job at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. I was part of his team in writing his last work, Africans at the Crossroads, as a reader when his eyesight failed. In reading the foreword again to The Iceman Inheritance by Michael Bradley, there is nothing in this foreword that makes Dr. Clarke a racist or having racist thoughts against individuals. When people engage in critique, they should first take some college classes on historical analysis to help them organize their thoughts. Reading without the essential tools that are in university classes helps in making unfounded critiques. Here, Dr. Clarke was critiquing racism not being a racist. In this long fight, we have used many words such as Caucasian and white, but we know they are social constructs that are used by those who uses this constructs to oppress us. Dr. Clarke has every right to castigate these words, for his critique is only on those who label themselves as this. Dr. Clarke has always been a master of words, and before one lays criticism on his words, they should seek to understand his usage by checking his whole works. I heard on the chat from people that I respect that they would castigate their children for using Dr. Clarke. Well, hopefully they will stumble on this YouTube paper when they do their literature review if they have to do a paper on Dr. Clarke. Be very careful, your children may turn on you intellectually as conditions of racism are increasing and affecting them, and they may love you but secretly believe that you are off course with white supremacy. I would just say that you may not be remembered as one who fought for their own ancestors' pain and suffering. Black YouTubers. Please do a better job in the future. Our struggle has been a long one and will be longer if we don't find solutions. We are often too hard on the ones who have tried to make a difference. Credit to Brother Unk. He supplied the photo of Dr. Clarke's tombstone. He took the time to put flowers on his grave. Will you?